So I'm currently on Iceland to do my master's degree in Viking and Medieval Norse Studies, and this degree is in collaboration with Árni. Now, I don't want to talk about what Árni exactly is, maybe later, but I do want to talk about their Manuscript Exhibition, because it's really fun, and I would recommend everyone visiting Reykjavík to visit this Manuscript Exhibition. So first, I want to give you guys some context and then some pictures from different manuscripts that have been in this newly opened exhibition. If you don't know who I am, my name is David. As I said, I am a master's student of Viking and Medieval Norse Studies. I am interested in the Viking Age. That's why I have this channel. I talk about queer-related things related to the Viking Age, but also just random other stuff that I just find interesting, and you guys also find interesting. So if you don't care about manuscripts, I hope I can change that, but feel free to watch my other videos which are not about manuscripts. So let's start with what is a manuscript. So very basically, a manuscript is any written source that is handwritten. Manuscripts, manually written. And when I say Icelandic manuscripts, you might think immediately of the sagas and Eddas. And this is correct, though there are many other types of manuscripts as well, like liturgical manuscripts, sort of almanacs regarding the weather or what you have to do in childbirth. But of course, the main focus will be on the manuscripts that are relevant to medieval Iceland and the Viking Age. So manuscripts did not stop being produced after the invention of the printing press in the 15th century. So a lot of manuscripts exhibited here are from the 16th, 17th, 18th century, but of course the coolest ones are from the 13th and 14th centuries. So now, very shortly, what is Árni? So the long title of this institution is Stofnun Árni Magnússonar, so the collection of Árni Magnússon, and for that I have to explain who is Árni Magnússon. So he was an Icelandic scholar who lived in the 17th and 18th century, and he traveled to Denmark for his studies because in those times Iceland was not a colony but a territory dependent on the Kingdom of Denmark, so Icelanders had to travel to Copenhagen to get a higher education, and he was very interested in the collection of manuscripts that he found relevant to Icelandic history. Now, if you know a bit of European history, you might be scared for a group of manuscripts in the 18th century in Copenhagen because of the Great Fire of Copenhagen. And yes, unfortunately, many of the manuscripts were lost in this fire, but not all of them. And before Árni Magnússon died, he put them in his will to go to the University of Copenhagen. Now, after Iceland became independent from Denmark in 1944, the manuscripts became political leverage. The Icelanders thought that these manuscripts containing Icelandic sagas, the Poetic and Prose Edda, were part of their cultural heritage and should return to Iceland where they were written. So this has been done partly, and now there are two sister institutions, the Stofnun Árni Magnússonar here in Reykjavík in Iceland, and the Árni Magnússon Institute in Copenhagen. Now, recently, last year, a part of these manuscripts has been made available to the broader public. Now, of course, they are very fragile, and not all manuscripts can be exhibited in full light all the time. So this exhibition that I want to talk about changes a lot. And, well, it's sad that the best ones are not always there. It's fun because you can see multiple versions of similar or the same stories, because that's the most important part about manuscripts. They are copies. They're never the original. There is no original Poetic Edda, there's no original Prose Edda, there's no original saga of any kind. They are copies of stories that probably come from an oral tradition that preceded the written culture of Christianity. So today I want to show you a bit about this exhibition. So very broadly, this is what it looks like. there's never a lot of people because, first of all, this is Iceland, and second of all, it is basically on university grounds. I have lessons next to it in the same building, basically. So not a lot of tourists really come here. It's mostly for people who are genuinely interested in medieval Icelandic history. And I would still recommend anyone going there because I think it's a really nice exhibition when it comes to just how it's shaped. And as I said before, the manuscripts are rotated, so there's not always the same ones. For example, the Codex Regius, one that people might know because it contains the fullest Poetic Edda, is currently not on display because it's, well, the most prized piece of the collection, so it just cannot always be put up for exhibition. But I do want to show some of the most interesting ones that I've seen there. And just for your information, if you're not able to travel to Iceland, they also have a nice website, which I've also mentioned before in the previous video, so you can go see the manuscripts there. And they're also, most of them are fully scanned and available on handrit.is, where you can just look through the original manuscripts if you need them for research or just for fun. So there have been some copies of the Prose Edda that are really beautifully illustrated. Now, as you can see, for example, this one is, the manuscript is not from the Middle Ages, but based on other versions, based on the language used, the original one can be traced to Snorri Sturluson, who wrote it. And I just love this one because it contains a lot of fun imagery of Norse mythology, but in a very later medieval, early modern style. So the people are dressed completely differently than people in the Viking Age would have dressed. Now, there are many books that are clearly old and used, but still somehow provide a useful literary source for medieval Icelandic scholars. So, for example, there is this one called Morkinskinna, which means rotted vellum, and it's not rotten, but it does look fairly old, and it contains a lot of sagas of Norwegian kings. Then there was also a paper manuscript copy of the Book of Settlements, which is also considered a very important Icelandic book because it basically functions as a legitimizing document for claims of land and heritage, which is also interesting to see. We can clearly see that this manuscript is very different from the vellum manuscripts. There was also tons of bishop sagas and saint sagas. As I've said before in earlier videos, people tend to think that the sagas are somehow only focused at pagan Viking Age themes, but they are written in a clerical environment by learned religious individuals aware of classical literature and biblical tropes. So a lot of sagas are actually very, very Christian, and even those who start in pagan times and with the protagonist being baptized. So there's that. Another fun manuscript currently on display since literally a few days is the Codex Triectinus, which comes from Utrecht in the Netherlands, where I've lived for 16 years. Well, not in Utrecht, but in the Netherlands. And apparently this is a very big thing because it's one of the main manuscripts containing the Prose Edda. So this one is not usually in the Árni Magnússon collection, but it's in the collection of the Utrecht University. So as you can see, there is an exchange going on and new manuscripts come to light that are normally not available to the public. Now, there's also some clearly religious manuscripts in the exhibition, like containing songs to be sung in church during Mass, which is also very interesting to see because it's a totally different notation that we're used to today, but they still can be deciphered and the songs still can be sung and played. And there's some manuscripts that are very small, basically pocket editions, that contain answers to questions related to giving birth, which could be used by midwives, for example, because while literacy and writing in the Middle Ages is typically associated with the male sphere, Iceland had a pretty high literacy rate and women could also read and write. And some of the sagas, such as Njáll's saga, are thought to potentially have been written by a woman based on the vocabulary used. So that is very interesting to see. And speaking of sagas, of course, there are some manuscripts containing a wide variety of sagas, such as Lagstæla saga, Njálls saga, Grettir's saga, all of that. And of course, it is an interactive exhibition, so it does not only simply contain the manuscripts, you can read more about them. There's panels where the people who research them talk about the research. There are some smaller interactive parts for children with stories about the Viking Age. And yeah, overall, it's very sensory friendly, it's very welcoming, and it offers a very nice, quite complete story of the different types of manuscripts that are relevant to the history of Iceland and related countries of Norway, Denmark, mostly. So yeah, as I said before, if you're ever in Reykjavík and you happen to be interested in this, then it's worth a visit. It's not that expensive, and it's pretty close to the National Museum of Iceland, which also contains some manuscripts and some other Viking Age artifacts. So yeah, of course, I'm not sponsored by the Árni Magnússon Institute, but as a student of Viking and Medieval Norse Studies, I do feel like a sort of spokesperson that can recommend their works and their exhibition to others. And of course, I have an annual pass, so you can find me there multiple times this year. So yeah, thank you for watching, and on to my small business talk. If you liked this video and you weren't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure to please do that. And if you liked it, please give me a thumbs up, comment something, because so many people just don't do that because it's not that important to them. But for a very small channel like mine, every small interaction helps me get that small, tiniest boost of visibility that it needs to be shown to more people. So it will mean a lot to me if you guys liked it, comment something, maybe share it with your friends, someone who might be interested.